Hello guys, I am Vitold and I'll show you the differences between the regular Honda Africa Twin 1100 and an Africa Twin 1100 Adventure Sports. And having ridden all current big adventure motorcycles, I'll give you some hints on what you might want to pay the most attention to here. What are the great things to have in your Africa Twin and what you likely don't need to be bothered with at all. And I'll also include my comment on DCT, so dual clutch transmission. Buying a bike is a huge process and a challenge, while making the right choice is the key to enjoying your bike for years to come, hopefully. So I want to make sure that you know how to choose and be happy with the result, also considering the value or the money that you've got to put on the table. And afterwards, you may also want to check my full honest review of the Africa Twin Adventure Sports with DCT, which is linked in the description. Now, let me begin with establishing what is the same in both Adventure Sports and the regular Africa, so that it's clear where we start off. And there are four main areas that are the same: engine, frame, suspension, and transmissions available. So I would say that in the case of Honda Africa Twin 1100, the base of the bike is always the same. And this is not obvious, as other manufacturers like BMW, Ducati, Triumph or Suzuki already may include some variations here, but not at Honda. However, with an exception of the suspension that I will comment on more later. There is the same engine here, and so the performance too. 1084 cubic centimeters of displacement, two-cylinder inline engine with 102 horsepower and 105 newton meters of torque. Not much, but fine even considering not the lowest weight of the bike at around 230 kilograms. And actually there may be one very small difference here, and it's because Adventure Sports version is heavier than the regular. Now of course more kilograms mean more work for the engine, but I would not assume that the differences are noticeable in any way, as there's around 9 kilograms more in Adventure Sports, so not anything crucial. The next area that needs mentioning is the seat height, which, because of the same base suspension, is the same in both versions and is at 85 or 87 centimeters, since it's adjustable in both versions with the possibility of buying a taller or a shorter seat for either of these. It's worth saying that the numbers are really impressive here, and there are 25 centimeters of ground clearance and 23 centimeters of front wheel travel, and in the rear it's 22 centimeters of wheel travel, of suspension travel, and that's really a lot. But since this is the same for both models and the wheels are the same with 21-inch front rim and 18-inch one in the rear, then everything stays the same. Both versions also have spoked wheels, but there will be one very surprising difference here. Now, a fact that is a big topic sometimes when riders first come across the idea of an Africa Twin and realize that there are two versions. The DCT, so an automatic dual clutch transmission, is available in both of those versions. It doesn't come as standard and you've got to pay extra for it, but you can get it no matter what other specification of the bike you choose, whether it's Adventure Sports or not. And if you go with it, you may add a lever that imitates a regular transmission setup, which I think is awesome, and I would go for it for sure myself, as I had some doubts about the manual change with the buttons with the DCT. You may see that in my full review also, and what it means in everyday riding. But if you stay with the regular transmission, you may add a quick shifter, which I personally would pay extra for in any bike today. Now, moving further to some last points, Africa Twin will always have cornering ABS, traction control, 4 predefined riding modes, an option of creating 2 custom ones, no crash bars as standard, this is worth stating, no keyless ignition as well. It always comes with LED front light with daytime running lights in the form of those rings, which are super nice, I think. And there will be one difference in this area, just like with the display, which is the same unit and is a touchscreen at the same time as well. That's not the only option of operation, but it's there as an addition. The screen is the longest loading screen, display, whatever you call it, in the whole category, so be warned here. More on that in the review, but there is some useful connectivity like Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. So very well thought out by Honda here. And the last point is cruise control, which also both are equipped with. So here we are, and if this already sounds like a lot to you in the base version, there's even more reason to see what the Adventure Sports offers is there are things that may win many of you over, I think. And they do, as we see in Honda showrooms. If you're wondering what office chair it is that I'm sitting on, then it's a great question with an equally great answer. It's called 7G11 and it comes with 18-way electric adjustment. You can see it at powerseats.eu. The first point on the list of 12 big differences is the fuel tank size, which is 18.8 liters in the regular version and 24.8 liters in the Adventure Sports, making it 32% larger, and automatically this means that the bike's range on one fuel tank should also be around 30% larger. This may matter to some of you, and when full, it means some 4.5 kilograms of weight added in fuel in the tank, comparing to the non-Adventure Sports version. Number 2 is connected with the first difference, and this means a slightly different shape of a tank in both bikes. Now take a look at it. Regular is more narrow, and in the Adventure Sports, it is all more bulky in that area. So because of that, the front side fairings are also different, but for some reason the rear side fairings are also bigger in the Adventure Sports version. Likely just a visual thing to make the regular variant seem kind of lighter and the Adventure Sports more, let's say, touring oriented. Now a big one that I announced before in the suspension section. Only the Adventure Sports version may receive Showa electrically adjustable suspension with a lot of settings available on the go with the flick of a switch, with a lot of differences between those settings, the modes that you choose. If for whatever reason you might have preferred the regular Africa, then I'm afraid that Honda has just made it much more complicated for you. The next difference, it may not make a big difference if you don't ride after dark, it's about front lights. And only Adventure Sports has those small additional lamps that you see just below the main lamp, and those small lamps are cornering front lights in fact, and you won't find them as an option even in the regular Africa. There are of course differences in design and especially colors, which will be at least partially different for both versions. Some color or colors, depending on when you're watching this video, may be the same, but some will be unique to a certain version. So beware here and don't assume anything after you see an Africa on the street and you happen to like that particular color. It may not be available in that particular version that you would prefer. Okay, so now in the sixth point, there are some equipment options that come as extra things for the regular version, but are already there in Adventure Sports. And they are heated grips, 12-volt power outlet, side deflectors, and there are also front deflectors that both can have as options. And then there are larger hand guards, so with an additional part on top of the so-called by Honda knuckle guards that the regular version gets by default. And now I mentioned that the wheels are the same in both versions. But then if you look at tire types, you will notice that Adventure Sports come with tires that are tubeless. In regular Africa have tubes inside. And I guess that despite it being a more, let's call it complex and generally not the most commonly used system anymore, it's for those who want spoked rims. Yeah, but then why the Adventure Sports also has spoked rims, but the tires there are tubeless? That's a good question. Well, it may be a possibility of replacement, of ease of replacement if you want to do it alone with simple tools somewhere in the desert. Maybe an idea of some traditional approach. I'm not sure if the price difference between the sealed spoked rims and those that are not sealed is so huge, so likely it's not that. On the other hand, if you make a nice, really nice puncture and your tube inside of the tire goes, it may go much more rapidly than a tubeless tire and it may lose air more quickly. An interesting move that I'm generally surprised by, but it's here in the regular Africa, so you've got to be aware that you're looking at a different setup in here. The eighth difference is in the windshields, but not only in the part itself, but the whole system, and this is a sneaky one because of that. In Adventure Sports, the windshield is taller, yeah, and it has manual height adjustment that the regular Africa doesn't have, and clearly cannot have. And I would say that this is an important point to know up front, despite how hard to process the reasons behind this may be here. They are hard for me. This goes along with the next point, and a display that in Adventure Sports is located slightly lower than the regular version, where the windshield is more just to protect the display from some road debris and so on. So in the normal Africa, it is higher a little bit. The 10th difference between the two is that in Adventure Sports there is a larger skid plate under the engine, And I wonder why it's not actually the other way around, if the regular version is more dedicated to wild, super wild off-roading and not so much touring. Check the windshield. The next one is weight difference, which in the base version is 229 kilograms versus 238 kilograms in Adventure Sports. And then there may be 2 more kilograms of electrically adjustable Showa suspension in the Adventure Sports version. And further 10 kilograms more if you go for a DCT, if you get it in either version. And the last 12th difference is in price, and this depends on the market. But here it's 17% more for Adventure Sports. This is without DCT, for around $1,200 extra here where I live, and then the optional Showa suspension, which is around $1,700 here. Models with electronically adjustable suspension have the ES in their name.
Yes.
And that's how you know which one is which. Otherwise, neither DCT nor this electronically adjustable suspension is on the list of options. You've got to choose a specific, let's call it a variant or a model of Africa Twin up front. So this way, the final price can go over 35% up from the base model to Adventure Sports ES with electronically adjustable suspension with DCT. And so which one to choose is the question right here. Would it make sense to go for Africa with no DCT? I personally don't think so. This is one of the coolest things about this motorcycle, I think, and it's unique to it in the whole category. It works great, and because of one thing in particular, I say, if Africa Twin, then only with DCT. And the reason is that I personally, and again, this is my own opinion, I feel that whatever you want the bike from this category for, there are motorcycles that do it better. Some will be better off-roaders, some will be more comfortable and more useful when touring, some will do better in the city and on shorter rides as well. But none can have DCT, and this can be this bike's heritage along with its name, of course. And thankfully, you can have both versions of Africa Twin with a DCT, so you're not limited here. But if you're already paying a lot of money and don't have an adjustable windshield or tubeless tires, then well, maybe it makes sense to go all in and get the Adventure Sports version with the ES in the name.
Yes.
It's definitely a bike for those that really want either a DCT or are simply fans of the model for whatever reasons. And I realize that many of you could be conflicted here and would like to first try a base version only with DCT and probably standard suspension, as on paper this option makes a lot of sense. But on the other hand, if you are an Africa Twin fan, then you'll go for the top specification bike and leave a huge hole in your wallet, and that's fine. But I think that you should see what to really expect from this bike, so I would say that you better check my full honest review of Africa Twin 1100 in here on the screen or in the link down below. So see you there!